Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise, ditch the jargon, and really get to the heart of what you need to know. Today, we're diving into something often, well, let's say oversimplified, male sexual function. Most people think it's basically all about one hormone, right? Testosterone. But our deep dive, looking at recent research and a really detailed article from the online men's health forum, ExcelMale.com, it tells a much more intricate story. And honestly, it's fascinating. So our mission today is to pull back the curtain on the incredible science behind desire, behind performance, reveal some surprising connections, and give you a genuinely holistic view. Okay, let's unpack this because I think it's going to challenge some common ideas about what really drives male sexual function.
Exactly. And what's so crucial to grasp right from the start is that, sexual desire and erectile function, they're not just simple responses, not like flicking a switch on or off. Instead, you should really imagine the sophisticated symphony playing out in your brain and body. You've got neurochemicals, hormones, entire biological systems, all working together as this complex, beautifully orchestrated biological foundation. And it influences everything from attraction right through to performance. So to start, let's talk about what researchers often call this neurochemical orchestra. Just picture your brain as this, grand concert hall. And inside you have all these different hormones and neurotransmitters. They're the instruments. And they're all playing together, regulating attraction, arousal, sexual behavior. It's an incredibly complex and dynamic interplay.
Okay, an orchestra. I like that. And if it is an orchestra, then our sources seem to point to dopamine as, well, maybe the primary driver, almost like the really energetic conductor leading the charge. We often link dopamine just with pleasure, right? But what's really insightful here is how much more it does. Expert, can you unpack that a bit? How it affects not just like the motivation, but the actual physical performance, even reflexes? Where is it doing its work in this brain concert?
That's a great way to put it, yeah. Dopamine isn't just that feel-good chemical. It's actively orchestrating the whole experience. It really acts like a multifaceted conductor, activating specific command centers deep in your brain. So, for instance, to get your motor systems ready for action, it fuels motivated behaviors like, seeking a partner. And it even directly controls the physical reflexes you need for sexual function. These aren't just abstract ideas. They're happening in really precise brain areas.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly intricate, that dynamic process. And expert, the sources mentioned something really fascinating about dopamine release, that it actually goes up not just during the act, but even when like a potential mate is just presented. What does that tell us about how the brain sort of anticipates and gears up?
Yeah, that's right. It tells us dopamine is heavily involved in the anticipation and the reward circuits. Think about that feeling of excitement, that buildup of desire. Dopamine is fueling that. The article actually talks about an escalating amount of dopamine release in a male as the mating behavioral suite progresses, with the highest release associated with ejaculation. It's like the orchestra hitting this big crescendo, right? Peaking as the action reaches its climax. So it's not a simple switch at all. It's a very dynamic, very responsive system, deeply tied to motivation and, the pursuit of pleasure.
Okay, so if dopamine is that energetic conductor pushing things forward, our sources also bring in serotonin as the natural brake. Sounds like a really crucial counterbalance. So how do these two, dopamine and serotonin, actually play this delicate balancing act? And I saw something about serotonin being a bit nuanced, different receptors doing different things. Can you simplify that for us?
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is precisely that balancing act. While dopamine's driving things, building motivation, serotonin primarily has an inhibitory role. It acts as the brake. But think of it like a complex braking system, maybe with different pedals. One pedal, acting through what scientists call 5-HTTC receptors, can actually help with erections, but then pump the brakes on ejaculation, often delaying it.
Okay.
Then another pedal, through 5-HT1A receptors, does pretty much the opposite. And serotonin is also released at ejaculation. This is actually why some medications, like SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which boost serotonin levels, can sometimes delay these processes. It's a really subtle but powerful balance, constantly modulating the experience.
Right, so it's complex. Dopamine as the accelerator, serotonin as the brake. Where does the most, let's say, famous instrument in this symphony fit in? Testosterone. Often seen as the driver, but our deep dive suggests it's more foundational, like it tunes the orchestra rather than leading every single note. How does this foundational hormone, as the sources call it, interact with dopamine and serotonin?
You're spot on, yeah. Foundational is the perfect word. We often link testosterone directly to sex drive, but its role is more about fine-tuning the whole system. It actually increases something called nitric oxide synthase in that key brain area we mentioned, the MPOA.
Boy, the medial preoptic area.
Right, exactly. And that, in turn, boosts the release of dopamine. So testosterone isn't directly pushing the accelerator itself. It's more like ensuring the accelerator pedal is responsive, that it works effectively. And by doing that, it facilitates copulation and those genital reflexes. The research is pretty clear. The elimination of testosterone in adulthood has been shown to reduce sexual motivation in both male humans and male primates. So it's like it sets the stage, making sure the other instruments are ready to play their parts properly.
And we shouldn't forget the bonding chemicals, oxytocin and vasopressin. Now, expert, we know they're involved in connection and trust, but how do they weave into this complex picture of male sexual function? Do they directly impact attraction or even the physical side of things?
Oh, absolutely. They're definitely more than just bonding chemicals. In males, oxytocin actually affects testosterone production right in the testes, and it seems to play a role in making men sexually attracted to women. But beyond just the physical act, as you said, oxytocin boosts trust, generosity, empathy. It reduces social anxiety. And what's really interesting is that oxytocin levels rise in the plasma during sexual activity. The sources say mainly at ejaculation and during the manipulation of breast and genitalia. So both oxytocin and vasopressin are intricately involved in regulating sexual motivation in both men and women. It really highlights the broader social and emotional aspects that are just as critical as the physical ones. It reminds us that sexual function is, a deeply human experience, not just biology.
Wow, okay. It is definitely anything but simple. So expert, with all these complex signals floating around dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, testosterone, and more, how does the brain actually bring it all together? Our sources point to the hypothalamus as the primary control center. How does this central command post manage to orchestrate both desire and performance?
We'll think of the hypothalamus as that grand conductor, finally bringing all the different instruments and sections together for the performance. It's essentially a crucial little switchboard deep within your brain that's specifically programmed for these kinds of sexual responses. It takes in all these neurochemical signals, all the hormonal signals we've talked about, and it coordinates everything from that very first spark of desire right through to the physical responses, like penile erection. It's the part that ensures all these individual elements work together in harmony, creating a coherent, unified sexual experience. So yeah, it's not just one switch. It's like an entire control panel, constantly adjusting and responding.
Okay, so we've explored this incredible internal symphony, all orchestrated by the hypothalamus. But, this isn't happening in a vacuum, right? How does this intricate neurochemical balance connect to our overall physical health? The choices we make every single day.
Exactly. That's the next logical step. If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we see is that what happens in the bedroom often mirrors what's happening with your overall health. Sexual function is deeply, deeply embedded within your general well-being. And various medical conditions, various lifestyle factors, they can profoundly impact this intricate neurochemical balance we've just been discussing. It's definitely a powerful two-way street.
Which brings us neatly to obesity. Our sources really flag this as a major risk factor. And the statistics, expert, they're quite striking. It says here 79% of men presenting erectile disorders have BMI of 25 kilometers or greater. And the risk jumps quite a bit with higher BMI too. But what's the actual mechanism? It's not just about the weight itself, is it?
No, you're absolutely right. It's not just the number on the scale. The article clearly links obesity and erectile dysfunction through what it calls a shared pathological environment, things like oxidative stress, inflammation, and insulin and leptin resistance. So imagine your body is under this kind of constant low-grade attack from these factors. Oxidative stress is like,
Right.
well, cellular rust. Inflammation is your body's alarm system just constantly blaring. And insulin and leptin resistance mean your cells aren't responding properly to really crucial signals. This whole toxic environment directly harms the delicate blood vessels and nerve pathways that are essential for healthy erections.
Yeah.
So those statistics, they're really pointing to a much deeper physiological issue going on under the surface.
And this connection, it seems to extend directly to conditions like diabetes and metabolic syndrome as well. How do these conditions speed up the deterioration of erectile function? And what was that interesting sort of cyclical problem you mentioned involving testosterone?
Yeah, these conditions are a direct threat because they fundamentally disrupt the molecular mechanisms that you need for erections.
Yeah.
Diabetes, for instance, damages blood vessels and nerves over time, both critical for penile blood flow and sensation. The article actually cites that erectile dysfunction is common in patients with diabetes, affecting up to 50% of men. That's a huge number.
Mm.
And what's also really key here, and quite concerning, is that low serum total testosterone can actually predict the development of central obesity and an increased risk of metabolic syndrome later on. So you can get caught in this really negative feedback loop. The metabolic issues lower your testosterone, which in turn can worsen the obesity and metabolic syndrome, which then further impacts sexual function. It becomes a really challenging cycle to break out of.
Okay, this next point feels like a real game changer. The idea that these aren't just separate conditions, ED, heart disease, but they're deeply intertwined, especially with cardiovascular disease, CVD expert. The sources show ED and CVD share so many common risk factors, right? And underlying mechanisms too. Why is this connection just so incredibly important for our listeners to grasp?
This connection is absolutely crucial because erectile dysfunction can, and often does, act as an early warning sign for underlying cardiovascular disease. They share these fundamental pathological mechanisms, things like endothelial dysfunction.
That's the lining of the blood vessels not working right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That, plus inflammation, plus atherosclerosis, the hardening of the arteries. These are the exact same processes that lead to heart attacks and strokes down the line.
Mm-hmm.
And the numbers are stark. The article says about 40% of men with ED will have hypertension,
40%.
while 35% of all hypertensive men will also have ED. So the takeaway is, if you're experiencing ED, it's not just a sexual health issue you need to think about. It's a strong signal that you really should be looking closely at your overall heart health. Your heart health and your sexual health are just undeniably linked. And often, ED can be the canary in the coal mine.
Right. Okay. Now let's pivot slightly to something truly foundational, something many of us, myself included, probably often overlook. Our sources call it one of the most underappreciated factors in male sexual health: sleep. Expert, how can something as seemingly simple as sleep have such a profound, almost immediate impact on these key hormones and overall sexual function?
It's really remarkable, isn't it? Sleep is just absolutely critical. Your plasma testosterone levels, they actually show a clear circadian rhythm. They naturally peak during deep sleep. And to properly produce these vital hormones, your body needs at least 3 hours of normal sleep architecture. That means getting through those deep restorative sleep cycles. The data points on this are incredibly impactful. Listen to this. After just 1 week of sleep restriction, testosterone levels were significantly lower. 16.5 mRNL versus 18.4 mRNL during waking hours. That's a noticeable drop in just a week.
Wow.
But get this, and this is what really stands out. Skipping sleep reduces a young man's testosterone levels by the same amount as aging 10 to 15 years.
10 to 15 years from skipping sleep.
Exactly. That's a huge, huge impact on your hormones just from not getting enough restorative rest.
That statistic alone should make anyone prioritize their sleep. Seriously. So if lack of sleep hits testosterone that hard, how does sleep loss also connect with stress and cortisol? You mentioned a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and this really raises an important question for everyone listening. Are you truly giving your body the foundational rest it needs? Because sleep loss isn't just about testosterone. It's deeply connected to your body's stress response system. Lower sleep duration isn't only associated with lower testosterone, but also with higher afternoon cortisol levels. That's your primary stress hormone. These kind of reciprocal changes, they create an imbalance in what's called anabolic-catabolic signaling. Essentially, your body's building up processes get inhibited while its breaking down processes accelerate. Not good.
Right.
Plus, sleep deprivation itself acts as a stressful stimulus. It activates your body's central stress alarm system, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis.
Yeah.
And this triggers a cascade, ramping up stress hormones like corticosterone, which can just throw everything out of whack. It truly becomes a vicious cycle impacting energy, mood, and, as we've clearly seen, sexual function.
Okay. So we've taken this really deep dive into the brain's symphony, the body's interconnected systems, the crucial role of things like sleep and stress. It's absolutely clear that male sexual function is incredibly complex. But what does this all mean for you listening right now? What can we actually do with this knowledge? Expert, let's just shift gears a bit towards some actionable insights. It really sounds like addressing male sexual function isn't just about, popping a pill. It's much more about holistic health.
That's absolutely right. Lifestyle interventions are incredibly powerful. They often form the cornerstone of any effective strategy. Our sources clearly show that improved erectile function correlated significantly with the amount of weight loss and increased activity. And it's not just a weak correlation either.
Yeah.
Physically active men, the article defines this as doing more than 16 MET hours per week of exercise.
Which is about
Roughly equivalent to maybe 2-3 hours of moderate to vigorous activity spread through the week, those men are at a 30% lower risk for ED than sedentary men.
30% lower risk just
Mhm.
from being active.
Exactly. Simple, consistent changes like regular exercise, healthy eating, they can reduce inflammation, improve circulation, help rebalance hormones, making a really profound difference.
And okay, what about testosterone therapy? It comes up a lot. It seems like it can be beneficial, but it's important to understand its specific place in this whole orchestra, right? It's not always the magic bullet, some might think.
Precisely. Testosterone therapy can definitely be a valuable tool for some, but it's often just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The research indicates it moderately improved the number of nocturnal erections, sexual thoughts, and motivation. Okay, but its effects on libido, on desire, were more consistent than on erectile function itself.
Ah, okay. So more desire, maybe not always better mechanics.
Kind of. So while it can definitely boost desire and those mental aspects,
Hmm.
it might not fully address the physical mechanics if other underlying health issues like cardiovascular problems or sleep disorders we talked about aren't also being managed. It really comes back to balance and addressing the root causes, not just slapping a bandage on the symptom.
And bringing it back full circle to that underappreciated factor, sleep. Sleep optimization sounds critical. What does optimizing sleep actually mean in practice? And what kind of improvements can listeners realistically expect if they focus on this?
Yeah, sleep optimization really means prioritizing not just the quantity, but the quality of your sleep. The goal is maintaining 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep, which, as the sources state, supports optimal testosterone production, energy, sex drive, and vitality.
Hmm.
And this isn't just, wishful thinking. Scientific studies show that treating conditions like sleep apnea, which severely messes with sleep quality,
Right.
and actively improving sleep hygiene, the basics, consistent sleep schedules, cool dark room, maybe avoiding screens right before bed, these things can lead to noticeable improvements in sexual function and steep increases in testosterone levels. It really is a fundamental, yet so often overlooked, pillar of overall health and well-being.
So, what we've really uncovered today is that male sexual function is this wonderfully complex, sophisticated regulatory system. It's not simple at all, which means effective treatment often needs a truly comprehensive approach, right? Addressing multiple factors, maybe all at the same time. We're talking medications, sure, potentially, but also things like stress management, actively improving cardiovascular health, definitely sleep optimization, and restoring hormonal balance if needed. It sounds like it's really about treating the whole person, not just focusing on one single symptom.
Absolutely. I think the overarching takeaway here is that prevention strategies, and treatment strategies too, should genuinely focus on overall health and well-being. Because as we've seen, sexual health is just intimately connected to your general physical and mental health. This means things like regular exercise, finding ways to manage stress proactively, getting adequate quality sleep, focusing on healthy nutrition, avoiding excessive alcohol or drug use. This isn't just generic health advice anymore. We can see now these are direct, powerful contributors to optimal sexual function. It really is a reminder that every single aspect of your health plays a part in this symphony.
What an incredible deep dive, expert.
Yeah.
Seriously fascinating, revealing just how profoundly interconnected all our body systems are in maintaining sexual health. It truly is a hidden symphony playing out on so many different levels. Thank you so much for helping us understand this amazing orchestration today.
My pleasure. It's a complex topic, but hopefully we've shed some light. And maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Considering how deeply interconnected our neurochemistry, our hormones, and our overall health really are in regulating sexual function, what single aspect of your holistic well-being do you think might be the most underestimated in its impact? Perhaps, how might you begin to explore that connection further for yourself? Just something to mull over as you go about your day.